Visit Elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
I'd like to welcome you to our fourth community engagement session. This is the last one of this phase. In case you don't know me, I'm Kara Caforio, one of the volunteer co-chairs. The other co-chair is John Morrissey. He'll do the activity later. Tonight, we have board members and administrators and our facilitating team here that have worked hard to prepare for tonight. So if they could just stand and be recognized, and we'd like to say thank you to them. So any board members and administrators and facilitating team? All right, thank you. So at the three previous sessions, we provided you a lot of background about the Focus 205 process, and I will not be going over that tonight. If you would like, if this is the first time you've come to one of these, I would encourage you to go to focus205.org and read about the process, and you can also review the other sessions that we had this fall. Remember that Focus 205 is a community engagement process to get the ideas and thoughtful suggestions of the school district's community, its stakeholders, and to put those into a meaningful dialogue and discussion that hopefully then will be presented to the board to help drive the decisions that are made for the next era of our district. A couple housekeeping items. Bathrooms are each side this way, and if at any time you would like a snack or water, it's in the back. All right. Okay, I'm going to take a minute and just review Community Engagement Session 3, just very briefly. As promised, we've documented all the comments that were made. They've in the middle of your table tonight, you have a few packets that are the verbatim documents and talks about what was discovered and talked about and the results of tasks 1 and 2. There's an executive summary document as well. So if you'd like to look at those, they're on your table and they're also available on the Focus 205 website. Taking some of the findings from Community Engagement Session 3 and the priority rankings from all the tables that were here, these items emerged as the top 5 overall community priorities for District 205. You can read them on the screen. They are in rank order: teacher quality and support, all-day kindergarten, modernized 21st century instructional facilities, Project Lead the Way, and balanced class size. These themes have been reflected in all 3 sessions this fall. And it's important to note that even as the participants change from session to session, those priorities have remained consistent. In the small groups last time that collaborated, they found the strengths and challenges for District 205's financial position, which was our topic last time. The strengths, as you can see, were the AA+ bond rating and the strong financial position. And the challenges, which are common, healthcare costs and future revenues due to state instability. So tonight, we're in our final session. If you'd like to see what we talked about at the other 3 sessions, that's up there on the screen. You can get all the information at Focus 205 and review them. And there's a Facebook page. You can sign up for a Focus 205 newsletter to continue to get updates. And finally, Tonight, you may not have all your questions answered, or you may have more questions, or maybe you want to make a comment that just there isn't time to make in your group. So on your table, there is a comment card, and gets peach in the box, and you are welcome to fill that out, and those will be collected by the team, and an appropriate person from the district will respond to that. We will try to get you out of here, as we've been pretty good, right at 9 o'clock tonight, so I will try to keep us on task throughout the evening. All right, last, make sure you signed in. And finally, just a brief note about what comes next. So this is phase 1 of Focus 205. This is just the beginning. In phase 2, we will begin that phase in 2016, early 2016, and that will include building level assessments, working on developing solutions in light of the priorities the community has identified in phase 1, and then presenting that information to the Board of Education. So with that, and this printout is in your packet as well, to begin tonight's presentation on facilities, our final topic, it is my pleasure to once again introduce Superintendent Dr. Dave Moyer, who will set the stage for this evening's presentation.
Thank you, Kara. Just in case. In my opening presentation, I discussed many challenges facing contemporary society, the implications for public education, and the inevitable need to become comfortable with the necessity of change. I asked people to imagine what could be rather than assume that what has been is all there is. Consider this. At one point, there were two major box store book retailers, Borders and Barnes & Noble. Borders had e-readers first, but was reluctant to bring the technology to the public, fearing it would alienate its loyal customers. Barnes & Noble marketed the Nook, and Borders is history. Montgomery Ward's answer to modernizing its business model was to keep its current customers happy and print increasingly larger catalogs. Amazon now dominates the mail order business with no eye to the future, entities perish. Whether some of us know it or not, or want to admit it or not, there are a significant number of people out there with power and money who wish to privatize education and turn it into a for-profit business. I assert without hesitation that this is the absolute wrong approach. That approach will further exacerbate the problem of a dwindling middle class and weaken, not strengthen, an already fragile economy. The better approach is to improve public education and ensure that all graduates are college and career ready. In session 1 through 3, we examined the concept of future-ready skills, celebrated current successes in District 205, examined what other successful school districts are doing, and asked for input on what the community values, and shared the current and anticipated future financial landscape of the district. Tonight, we are attempting to further advance the dialogue by considering the facility ramifications to support future-ready learning. Hospitals and universities routinely invest in infrastructure, as do corporations. This investment is rarely questioned. Due to funding and politics, most EC-12 public school districts face enormous challenges and struggle to adequately maintain and upgrade their infrastructure. The architectural firm White & Company, which has had a long-standing relationship with the district, has agreed to present tonight on the state of the district's facility needs and help us begin a conversation about potential next steps. The reality is, at some point, the community will have to do something. Will this something set the community up for the next 50 years or more, or will it be a short-term fix that buys 10 years, but, in fact, fails to support any of the district's long-term goals and results in all of us repeating the same conversations we're now having in the year 2025. The goal is for the board and administration to garner input on crafting a long-range plan that supports the moral imperative of raising the bar and closing the achievement gap for all students, ensures financial sustainability, and combines the three major functions of student achievement, finances, and facilities into a coherent vision. The vision must provide for both enhancements and efficiencies. This can be done, but it will take creativity, courage, and community support for the district to achieve this win-win-win. So, our topic for this evening. School facilities play a critical role in the ability of a school district to deliver instruction in an effective manner. That is the emphasis of this session, School Facilities in the 21st Century. Our presenters this evening are Kevin Havens and Wendy Watts of the architecture and design firm White & Company located in Darien, Illinois. Following the presentation, we will be asking you to work in your small group to respond to some key questions. So please listen closely and take whatever notes you think relevant for these upcoming discussions. Please join me in welcoming Kevin and Wendy.
Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate very much the invitation to come here this evening. My name is Kevin Havens, and I'm an architect and design director with White & Company, and was part of the design team that recreated York High School some years ago. In fact, I think it was 15 years ago, and I remember standing right about here when this was an outdoor courtyard, and we were talking amongst ourselves and with the school administration about how could we make a better use out of this outdoor courtyard that could really serve not only the student needs, but the needs of the community as well. And so this was the result of that kind of thinking, which is the power of a facilities master plan. And we're going to be talking about more this evening.
Hi, and my name is Wendy Watts, and I'm an interior designer who's devoted the majority of my career focusing on school environments. But I'll also add that I'm a community member and parent of 2 kids at Sandburg Middle School who went through Edison. So, and I've sat just where you are at these tables for the last several sessions, so I wear many hats in this conversation.
I also want to recognize Terry Moeller, who's sitting somewhere in the back, who's one of our project managers and has been involved with the district ever since we first began here at York. So, it was back in 1998, I believe, that we were first commissioned by the district to take a look at untangling the original mess that York High School was after many, many additions and remodelings to think strategically about configuring the school for the future. And on that, we've also done a lot of work with regards to life safety, renovations with other buildings in the district. We're also primarily designers of educational environments. So we've worked in like-minded communities similar to Elmhurst, Naperville, and Downers Grove, and Northbrook, and have crafted many facilities and master plans to take them into the future as well. In fact, many of the original conversations we had more than 15 years ago here are actually being extended to an addition we're putting on New Trier High School in Winnetka right now, and we'll share some of that thinking with you. Other institutions in the neighborhood we're also familiar with. If you've been on the campus of Elmhurst College, which is just a jewel of a 4-year school in the neighborhood, we've done much of the master plan for that Arboretum campus, and many of the new facilities is there as well. In addition to other neighbors like IC Catholic Prep in
Plunkett Park.
Plunkett Park, thank you very much, with regards to many of their athletic facilities. But that's enough about us. And what we want to do is turn the attention this evening to this idea of creating a master plan and thinking that way about a long-term future for District 205. So I like the analogy of comparing a master plan to crafting a roadmap. When you're ready to take an excursion, you know what your destination is, but you may not know the best way to get there. So the roadmap is really the idea of providing many paths, alternatives, recognizing that there may be detours along the way, balancing resources, and just some realities that things change in time to make sure you're always on course. And so we're going to be thinking about how to craft a roadmap for District 205 as we chat this evening. Master planning can be thought of as kind of a complex process, but I want to break it down into some easy to understand components this evening. So 3 big things to think about. Really begins with some very basic metrics regarding enrollment. How many students are in the district now? What do the demographics say about projections for the future? And how do we go about thinking about what's the right enrollment in each one of the facilities? A second category is just taking a very sober look at the condition of your schools. Every school in this district is very different. There are no cookie-cutter schools, and they've all been built at various times, and so their needs are different with regards to infrastructure and the special and unique configuration each one has. And we're going to be talking about that in a moment. But finally, and this is going to be the focus of our conversation this evening and the work that we're going to be asking you to do in just a little bit, is to talk about more of the intangible. And that's the idea of aligning a physical facility so that your students, your children, can have the best preparation for the future, because facilities can either inhibit education or really provide an environment that makes it much more conducive. And we're going to give you examples of just that. So as we move forward this evening, tonight's mission, although this sounds like a lot of information, is really, after we've spoken for a while, is to have you do some work at your tables with your neighbors and think about what priorities you have as teachers, as community members, and as parents for this district. So I wanted to recognize that there's been a lot of good homework done. We're not starting with a blank piece of paper. There's been an excellent report card, frankly, that's been prepared on every school in this district. And I want to congratulate Frank Hsu and the facilities team on putting this together. You have several copies at your table, so please take a look at it and take one home with you. And you can do a little bit of homework. But tonight we really don't want to review the nuts and bolts of leaky roofs or mechanical systems that don't quite work well. We really want to talk about this more important and more intangible issue of environments that provide the best possibility for education to take place. So with that, let's see what the conversation around the world has been.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are gathered together to mark the extraordinary occasion of the opening of 3 new elementary schools. Our hopes and dreams for the future are embodied in our children. The schools they attend are the places of promise and the linchpin of our community.
Whenever we design schools, we try and create environments that will be supportive of how children learn. We're very conscious of creating appropriate environments for children that support the way that educators think about learning.
You know, we had old elementary schools, so we right away said we want to do something different with libraries. And really most of this came from teachers and principals saying, you know, only one class can go at a time, and it's scheduled. So we moved from that to this learning corridor concept, where the library is almost a continuous presence throughout the building.
Recent neurological research has really given us new insights into how we all learn. Being very active, that mind-body engagement really helps reinforce learning. So what does that mean for a school? It means that you want to have places where children can move around, where children can build things. You want to have project-based activities. Another important idea is collaboration. Brains learn best when they work in concert with one another. We all learn in different ways. Schools need to have different types of spaces that support those different types of learning.
Educators are saying that kids need what we call the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking for the workplace, but also just the world we live in and the way that our economy is changing. So this space offers a lot of opportunity for a whole range of convocations of gatherings of kids to be taking place outside of the classroom.
Instead of just being crowded in one spot, you get to help others and go to different places.
We've always felt that these activities and these project things were important. We couldn't do it in our classrooms. We always had to find spaces for it. But having the space and having the area will make it easier and therefore more fun.
There's a time for whole class instruction, but much more of our curriculum is designed to be more personalized, more individualized, so you have children working in small groups.
And it's kind of good to learn with other people. What you know is good, and what they know, you could put them together and make something to connect with both of your stuff, and you could be an even better student.
We want our students to be able to spread out, whether it's a center of games and a center of problem solving, a center of skill practice, or it's everyone working on a group project at the same time. There'll be a variety of different ways to utilize the spaces, and we can always clean up our messes, which is ingenious to put sinks everywhere in a school.
There are chairs and tables to sit at. There are flat surfaces to put projects on and to explain projects to other classrooms. So there's going to be collaboration among classrooms.
All working on different projects at the same time and not getting in each other's way.
The whole school is not only a library, but the whole school is sort of like a mixed media environment. It's all wired. From anywhere you are, you're going to be able to gain access to that information.
And so when we bring everybody's strengths to something, we come up with a much better project. And isn't it good to teach children that that's how the real world works?
We all collaborate more because we're out in the hallway, or we're in the classroom, or we see what's going on, and it's so much easier to step in and step out.
The first grade teachers all work on the same science units. They can now set up that science unit and they can work together.
So I think it's going to have to be a culture that's built of we're all in this together. There's things going on in the hallway, so not only do you have to behave, but you have to be respectful of what's going on. Maybe you want to peek over what they're doing, but you can't be disruptive because the learning is going to be coming out of the classroom more often, so it's going to be a culture shift, I think, as well.
I love the fact that there's no door here because kids can see the adults that are their teachers working with each other.
The teacher on the south side of the building can see a fifth grade teacher on the west side. And it's kind of cool because they look all the way through class.
When you have a very public culture of teaching and learning, it really raises the level of accountability for students, for teachers.
The room here, I think, is wonderful, the room between the two rooms, because that has a window. I have no qualms at all about sending children in there and saying, hey, you might want to work on this a little bit.
So this could be easily a place where our two fourth grade teachers here plan together and work together. It could be a place where they have kids that come do independent work here. It's a quiet space, which I like. They can close the door, but they've still got visual access, and it's nice that you can have visual accessibility right through to the other classroom. They've always got about 10 sets of adult eyes just kind of informally kind of supervising and surveying them. And that allows them to take on a role of being much more independent and responsible.
For me as a principal, I have the opportunity to see a whole lot of what's going on.
Transparency gives you a sense of, what's happening as you walk down this hall. You can see into the classroom, you can see into the library. We've got display happening. Eventually, we're going to see lots of rows of projects here. The whole school becomes kind of an evolving artifactorium, and like a science fair, but it's happening all the time, and it's not just science.
Kids take great pride when they see their work being displayed, and also students learn from seeing other students' displays.
And when kindergartners see second graders doing things, they think, oh, that's achievable.
These small project areas that are all around that I'm still discovering, to be honest, walking around. Anytime you can get third graders up and out of the room, and walking around the school and to different places, they get excited about that.
It makes learning feel very special. Every time we move to another place, a change of scenery is fantastic for kids, so they're not feeling stale.
Now here, there's the nook here, and then there's the project areas and our classrooms and the library. So there's a lot more spaces to work.
And it's good to move around sometimes because you get bored of the same place over and over again. And
other places have other tools.
We are about learning, and learning takes place not just in classrooms, but everywhere in this building. Everywhere you look, in a nook or a cranny, there's a place for learning to take place. There's a place for kids to collaborate.
One of the places that we're all coveting right now is the story room upstairs, which is this wonderful circular room, cozy and warm, and what better place than to have a story read to you.
One of the things we've learned is that reading aloud to the younger students is a very powerful intervention because they take pride in their ability to do it, and it's also just practice.
You want me to do this another time?
Yeah!
Up there, there's little boxes. It absorbs the sound really, and it isn't so echoey when you speak.
And it's everybody will be able to hear.
Acoustics are incredibly important within a school. As adults, we need only hear a portion of a conversation, and often we have enough context that we can understand what's being said. But for a young child, if you can't hear every word, you don't have that contextual backdrop to fill in what's missing. Natural light is critical in school buildings. We know there have been studies done that show that students learn more readily in naturally lit environments. So we work very hard to bring natural light into every space.
Just the air in here, I think that's going to be huge. The old buildings had the big windows too, but the kids haven't been used to this before. They're used to, in the afternoons when it's hot, I'll sometimes look out at my class and they'll be slumped over and sweating, and just, it's so, it doesn't get hot in here, you know, because of the way that the building was designed with the air exchange and the windows. That is really going to be a big upgrade.
I like the pictures like where the little rooms are, because like it's about Christopher McAuliffe. It's like in one part there's a spaceship, in another there's Saturn, in another there's just a butterfly, and in one more there's a rocket ship.
We know that students have to be emotionally engaged to learn well.
We want our students to be good independent workers, good collaborative workers, problem solvers. We want them to stretch themselves in terms of research and synthesizing and communicating everything they've learned.
If within our schools we can create places that the students enjoy, that they associate that sense of joy with learning, then that will help everyone understand that learning is a wonderful part of life.
We've spent a lot of time behind closed doors or working in isolation, and the Learning Corridor changes all of that.
Teaching for a long time has been classroom-based, and to get it out of the classroom is one of the dreams that I've always had, and that's why I'm kind of on the cusp of retirement, but wouldn't happen until after I got to teach in this building. It's brought youth back to my thinking.
Because you're not always stuck in the same place, like, because you're always like just looking for some inspiration and stuff.
It makes us feel like we're trusted.
And we're growing up and we're responsible.
Like if you walked in here, you wouldn't think it was the kind of place where it's like a boring work job where it's not very fun. You'd think of it as, wow, this is cool, and it appears to be a school for kids. It even looks like it. And the colors are just very like bright and fun. It's not like the opposite of boring.
Okay, so a phrase that is really common in our architectural world as well as the education world is 21st century learning, but we really feel that we're better positioned and aligned because we're well into the 21st century to talk about it as future-ready learning. So let's pause for a moment and think, are our schools future-ready? So let's also think about why this is actually important. There's a noted author, Simon Sinek, who has quite a few TEDx videos, and there's one from about 5 years ago where he defines some research about the golden target. And what that is about is organizations that tend to be very successful and individuals that are very successful. There's some common attributes. So I think most companies and most people know what they're doing and how they're doing it, but the distinguishing factor of a very successful organization is understanding why you're doing something in a certain way. So the mission for District 205 is students, so being able to really understand why and what the future world is that we're preparing these students for.
So what does this all mean, and how can we get a handle on it? Well, one idea is to take a look at what other people are saying about the current learners who are in the system today. There's been a lot of writing about Generation Z, and these are kids who were born in the late 90s to about 2010 by that definition. And it's a fascinating study. It's very, very important as we think about this new generation not to look at it through the lens of our own learning. That is, the way we went through school is very, very different than what students today in the world they're facing. And I think we're not always thinking about the very, very special ways in which students today are unique learners. This is a snippet from a website that I encourage you to visit. This is McCrindle Research, and they have a fascinating little research study on the characteristics and traits of the various generations from the baby boomers on. And they have some interesting observations about this Generation Z that I think are very applicable to learning environments. So not through our own lens, but through the lens of these kids. And what we find are some very interesting characteristics. So as you drill a little bit deeper, one of the things is this idea of mobility, that students today in their careers and lifetimes are going to experience most likely many, many jobs, multiple careers, and probably move around geographically more than any of us in this room have. And this makes it unique because learning really needs to be a skill to relearn over and over again to keep up with the changes in terms of environment and the way the world is shifting.
So I could look at my students, or my children, both 7th graders at Sandburg. When they graduate from college in 2025, knock on wood, they will enter a workforce that's going to be made up with about 1/3 of their own generation. So take that in combination with the Generation Y group ahead of them. That's over 60% of the workforce is going to be some of those like-minded individuals that have grown up far differently than we all have. So another attribute of that group is that being able to work in teams and collaborate and have very clear, effective communication skills, negotiating skills, much more so than, you know, sitting in the back of the class and being led by someone and having someone tell them what to do and then doing that. I mean, I think I know that I have 2 at home that don't always like to be told what to do and work much better when they're not. Another fact, if we take a look at a younger group, the kindergartners right now, today, they were born the same year as the iPad. So their whole existence, that's been something that's available. Older students that you have here at York, the junior class, they've lived their entire life with Google being around. Not to mention that on smartphones today, they have Google with them 24/7, all the time. Much different world. So I think we can very clearly conclude that the world is changing, our students are changing, so shouldn't the environment also change? Looking back at a classroom from the last turn of the century, we see very much of a factory type of environment, cells and bells of classrooms down either side of the corridor, classrooms configured very rigid, desks all facing one direction, teacher is the center of their universe, disseminating information to individuals. Move forward several decades, I think this is either from the 80s or 90s by the hair and dress, not much had changed, really. Still sort of that same teacher-focused, individual students working solitarily. We see a little bit more of an ode to social emotional learners with the quote on the board about politeness means kindness. So moving into the future, what we hope learning spaces could have and embody would be spaces that have the student as the center of the learning environment, with much more options and choices, embedding technology in the space, but still having those hands-on tools as well. Another idea and thought is just some simple technology, a product that's called Google Exhibition, and this is a way of bringing the world to the students that the school bus taking them on a field trip on a daily basis just couldn't. So this is a program and an appliance that allows the teacher to navigate and allow students to see three-dimensionally different things, like this is showing something at the barrier reef, but it could also be other different topics too. So and the reason why this is important is that idea of full immersion in an environment and student engagement ultimately is the goal.
So there are many, many people talking about this topic of future learning and future ready schools. In fact, the author Tony Wagner, some of you might be familiar with, has been very articulate in researching this really as his primary passion, trying to understand today's learner and position them for a successful future. He has a popular book that was written, referred to as Creating the Next Innovators. And this is something that has gone a long way to defining the 4 C's that were mentioned a little bit earlier. So he has 7 core competencies of innovation, things like critical thinking and problem solving as being fundamental to learners today. Agility and adaptability, so that they're not thrown off by topics that change in a world situation that's churning. Effective communication, both spoken and written, is a fundamental skill that even the youngest learners need to learn to ensure success in their education and certainly careers beyond. Being collaborative learners that can work not only with fellow students and coworkers, but across broad networks, even internationally, and lead by influence, not necessarily by traditional hierarchies. And I think the fuel that he talks about that drives all this is this idea of creative curiosity and imagination. That's really the spawn of innovation. So what can schools do to provide the best opportunity to make all that happen? Well, we've kind of reduced it down to 3 things that might be relevant this evening. And the first clearly has to be the teachers, quality teachers. And you are blessed in District 205 with a abundance of talented and passionate teachers in this district. What they need is to be supported, not only by coworkers around them, but by the facilities that they have to teach in every day. Secondly, this idea of a relevant and rigorous curriculum is something that's always changing, and it's for good reason because our world is. But there are some overarching things. In our state, the Common Core curriculum is something that's been adopted and needs to be infused. And the next standard, which will be the next generation science standards, are coming, and that's going to have to be incorporated in the curriculum. But the piece this evening that we want to talk about impacting is this last one, and that's effective learning environments that can provide the best situation in a physical setting for doing all these things that the author Tony Wagner spoke of. So as designers, we like to make analogies because it's easier to understand. We like to think about school design being much like anatomy, and that is that there's many components in a school. And they're really like parts of the body, and they need to work together in a cohesive way for a healthy functioning system. And that's not always the case in schools. And driving towards that kind of prospect is what we're interested in talking about. So we're going to walk through a series of images that kind of portray what this idea of 21st century or future-ready learning could look like.
So at the core of all of your buildings, primary education space, the classroom. And while flexibility is really important, we believe agility is even more important. For a classroom to be able to change and morph and turn on a dime and allow different functions to happen, this is actually the same space that I'm showing. So what we have here is kind of what Kevin alluded to, the idea of there's a kit of parts or a skeleton. It's the immovable wall along with the furniture that's going to allow that flexibility to happen quickly and different modes of learning to happen on a regular basis. We also like to think of a suite of learning spaces working in tandem together and solitary at times. This is a grouping of classrooms that are able to empty out into, they call it a shared space. So where this is really great is you have the ability for team teaching and some pull-out groups, which we know full well the district is already doing and embracing despite the facilities. So just think of the opportunities of what could happen if this facility would work hand in hand with what you're trying to do. Also, you don't necessarily need a ton of space to provide some different type of environments outside of the classroom. This is taking just a little bit of square footage in a corridor and providing some space, low-tech completely, for interactions between students, or perhaps it's a great pull-out space for a teacher to interact with a child. So we like to look at corridors as being far more than just circulation pathways. Also, carving out spaces outside of the classroom, again, where learning can happen and group collaboration, perhaps some access to technology. You can just see that the student engagement level, when they can take charge of their own education and have some tools at hand, really energizes. One of my personal favorites is taking a look at libraries and perhaps transforming them into learning commons, somewhat of what has happened here at York already. Having that learning space be something beyond just a destination for books and collection and research. Having that be nearby the classrooms that students can access quickly and have different types of seating arrangements. Again, buying into that whole idea of student choice and them taking the reins to how they're going to work, either solitarily or in groups, is just great. Then looking at things a little differently too, this is a small space that was carved outside of a couple classrooms where we have dedicated space for individual solitary learning, yet you're still amongst a big environment and can be supervised, and maybe some medium-sized groups.
I mentioned earlier the process behind formatting this space here at York being the Commons. Thinking way back, the conversation really was that the school had no heart, that had a cafeteria that was kind of confined, and it had corridors, but there really was no place for for students to get together during the day to work to talk together, to work on projects, and there was no space whatsoever other than the auditorium for community groups to get together like we're doing tonight. So the Commons was a big part of that, and we're finding in more and more schools this becomes an important feature about a changing culture within the school environment. So fast forward now from 15 years ago to some thinking today. I mentioned earlier New Trier High School in Winnetka is now taking this idea a little bit farther, blurring the lines between single function areas like a dining hall and a library upstairs, and allowing students during the course of the day to bring meals into the library space, to have it be, instead of a place of quiet, that it's a place where you can work interactively with technology, with librarians, with faculty, and with one another as students on projects, so that during the day, instead of a space having a single function like a dining room, it has multiple functions, harder working spaces to make it more efficient for the school and a much richer environment for students. So technology is probably an issue that every district across the country is elbow deep into, but it's much, much more than just devices and wireless environments. It really has to do with the spaces so that the technology can be very transparent and meaningful, much like the offices probably many of you work in. So for example, this is a space where students before it was remodeled, really didn't have the ability to get together to work on a project like these kids who were putting together a presentation and able to have technology where each one could own the screens from their own device and very rapidly work. So it's spaces combined with technology that's really the secret.
So another type of environment that could really help some programs that I know have been considered here, whether it's STEM or maker spaces, having that right environment that's going to support those activities, which tend to sometimes be a little bit messier, have ventilation requirements, maybe a little bit more power. Having those amenities are really going to help those programs perform in the way that you intend. Not to mention having the luxury of a little bit of space that projects can stay out long term or longer term, so students can really get into some deep inquiry and discovery for those type of projects. This space takes on a little bit more of a science slant, and again, that idea of having all the right utilities that you need, the gas, this one didn't have gas, but power, water, maybe even some access to the outdoors where there's a growing garden for that type of enrichment for science. So for all students, regardless of the age group, health and comfort are of a concern. And there's a lot of different factors that play into students' health and comfort, not to mention the teachers as well.
But it goes beyond just health and comfort. These characteristics are really backed up by research and data, that when the environment is conducive to learning, kids learn better. There's studies that have been done with regards to daylighting, that kids perform better in daylit spaces on exams and on retention rather than in spaces that are entirely lit by fluorescent lights, for example. Acoustics is another very, very important thing to happen in the classroom and in presentation rooms. Students, particularly those where English may not be their first language, need to have low sound levels, or low noise levels rather, so they can hear the articulation of their teacher. Sound reinforcement for teachers in larger spaces is important. All those things have guidelines that are very well defined and can actually are measured successes that can be used in school design. Outdoor learning is an opportunity we don't often think of. We're challenged in the Chicago climate to think about using outdoor spaces, but it's very possible. Having learning continue outside the traditional classroom is a wonderful opportunity, whether it's purely recreation for younger kids or the opportunity for actual learning environments, be there gardens or gathering spaces outside the school building is something that should be at least thought about. And that connects to the idea of fitness and wellness as well. Beyond just traditional physical education and competition sports, the idea of developing a habit of lifelong fitness and wellness is something that's very, very important and can really be provided within the right school environment. This would extend to nutrition as well with regards to dining options. So safety and security is something that obviously is in the news quite often, and needless to say, teachers, staff, students need to feel safe to have a healthier learning environment. So good design is the primary feature in ensuring this, and certainly aided by technology. And it's a long topic, but obviously a very, very important and fundamental one.
So let's not forget about our youngest learners as well, and having the spaces that support them for the right size scale and the environment that's going to work best for them. Because after all, we want the students to be future ready when they're coming to the schools to get ready for their future ready education.
But we want you to understand that if your schools don't look like this today, this isn't about building brand new schools. In fact, most of the examples we showed really have to do with what we call repurposing, remodeling existing schools, using existing structures that haven't outlived their usefulness, but just aren't configured right. So this idea of transforming a school is very, very possible. We wanted to show you some examples of that.
So let's take a look at a very typical school corridor, lockers on both sides, small entrances into the classrooms, and with a little bit of work, what can be done in terms of opening space up, getting some transparency into some of those small group spaces I had mentioned before. Perfect type of pull-out space for individual teacher to work with one student or perhaps a small group. Not to mention, if you look further down the hall, a gathering of benches. Again, another great place to maximize your corridor use for projects. And again, not just have corridors be circulation space. Taking that idea in a different way, which again, you can see this doesn't take up a whole heck of a lot of square footage, but the benefits and the flexibility of what you can do with a space like that are great. Sometimes when we have spaces that are intended to be flexible and multi-purpose, they end up having no purpose, kind of like this, a little graveyard of chairs. So you could also take that idea and with a little bit of carving out of architectural support, get a space that supports multiple different functions. Again, those individual learners, medium-sized groups, small groups. A library that, packed to the gills with stuff and technology like lots of spaces are, can be opened up a little bit. This is actually the same school entirely. We did back up in this photo a little bit, but extending that library experience even out and creating a very welcoming entry. Again, another classroom, rigid tables and chairs set up that way, and I think you saw this one earlier. Again, through the use of some different types of furniture, you're inviting so many other ways that the room can be used and appeal to different learning styles. Computer labs. So we know in our district that we're moving closer towards one-on-one in the older grades. What do you do with all those computer labs now that everyone has a device in their hands? So that's where you could start to think about using technology differently for the students, but giving them those spaces that's going to support that.
Well, we'd like to spend all evening showing more pictures. It's fun to do because it's so exciting to see schools transformed. But we don't want to forget about the very real fact that there's been a lot of investment made in District 205. And we want to just be mindful that every school has received actually a lot of work over the years. So we want to take you through very, very quickly kind of a recount of all that. So we're going to start with the elementary schools with Edison and Emerson. And just as a timeline, it's kind of fun to think back about who was president at that time when the work took place with these two schools beginning back in the Eisenhower administration. But going back in time farther at Field Elementary, going all the way back to Harding, the school was first built, and you can see in subsequent decades more and more work was happening, but largely it was keeping up with enrollments, expanding for more students to be received, not really with a master plan of how learning would take place in the future, or really even having that conversation back in these decades. So marching along, Hawthorne Elementary School, actually the site of Hawthorne, many of you might know, was the original school in the district. In fact, it was a wood frame building that burned down. And it was in 1921 that a one-story brick school was built that actually was this facility, and then about 7 years later, before the Depression hit, the second story was added. At Jefferson and Lincoln, you can see a similar kind of story where every school gets touched in some ways. Lincoln, because of its age, 1915, just a few years after the Cubs won the pennant, it was built and has been transformed and added on to, on and on and on, not necessarily really addressing some of the fundamental issues that still exist in that facility. So kind of in summary, we often look at a metric with regards to school. And this is a very simple one. This is a graph of all the elementary schools that we just very quickly addressed. And this shows enrollments. And you can see the schools are various sizes, and they're serving various students from Edison on one end to Lincoln on the other. A metric to put on this is also the square foot per student. This is important to us as planners because it's a general insight into whether a school is sufficiently sized to take care of the population that's there. And there's a broad brush range of about 120 to 140 square feet per student for elementary schools. That is a good guideline, although it's very individual, so it's a little bit of a broad brush. But it shows that in this district, some are doing pretty well in this metric and others are falling a bit short, even with all those additions over those decades.
So taking a look now at the middle schools being a little bit newer across the 3 different ones, we can see the years that things were added on to. And then the enrollment and the variety that we have there, a little bit closer, not as much of a range. And then the square footage per student. And we could see that Bryan certainly is a little bit tighter than Churchville and Sandburg. And again, taking that same metric that Kevin talked about, it's a little bit bigger when we're looking at middle schools, and that plays out and shows that Bryan would be on the lower end of space per student than the other 2 schools.
So we want to conclude this little tour by looking at schools that kind of bracket the youngest ages, and then of course the oldest being York. At Madison, Madison originally was an elementary school, and then in time it was converted to be partially early education and the district administration. Administration has moved out now to a new location, and now it's entirely an early childhood center, but really is still living in the shell of an elementary school, not quite aligning with the needs of the very, very youngest learners. And then finally, York High School, again, one of the oldest in the district. And although this has probably been planned with the greatest foresight with regards to future-ready education and learning, it's interesting to look back and see that one of the major planning ideas we had when this school was redone is we actually tore down additions that were built back in the 50s and the 70s, which were very dysfunctional, built a much larger addition and reorganized the school. So I think the success here is that it's planned for a modern delivery of education, yet it didn't ignore the important component to the community of this traditional and beautiful historic school. In fact, it wasn't until the additions were torn down that the community even remembered that the old school was still there. They thought it had disappeared decades ago. So that was quite a find. Well, we want to wrap up this evening and not go too long, but we want to first say is that the situation in 205 actually is pretty similar to most districts across the country. The kind of decisions and realities you're facing are really very similar. Aging facility infrastructure is something that's just ongoing, and as the schools get older, it just becomes more serious. Ongoing maintenance as a result of that. Other ideas about the optimization of space that we talked a little bit about tonight, about having schools operate better in a new paradigm from when they were built many decades ago. Supporting curriculum changes that are coming and will never end probably, and also adequate space for the youngest learners that we touched on very, very briefly. In the last community session, Dr. Moyer mentioned, along with Chris Welton, the reality of the funding situation here in Illinois, and it's just something that is going to have to be worked with. Every district is really in the same boat in that regards. But I think in all, if we can kind of stay focused, if you remember the roadmap analogy of always having the same goal and recognizing there might be some divergent paths to get there, it's thinking about spaces, school spaces that are aligned with future-ready students. That's the mission. So we're going to begin we're going to end where we began, and that is just reminding you of the ingredients of the facility master plan. And we mostly talked this evening about this last one, about educational alignment. And this now turns to something we're going to ask of you. We've done a lot of talking, and we'd love now for you to talk to your neighbors and your colleagues at the tables together and answer a few simple questions. And what we're going to do is kind of distilling all this that we've mentioned tonight. There's some questions in front of you and some exercises to do that really have to do with prioritizing in your minds what's most important in District 205. So with that, I'm going to ask John to take this.
Thank you, Kevin and Wendy. The committee, the communication committee, heard this 2 weeks ago, and our conclusion was, wow, who's going to pay for all this stuff? And we know who's going to pay for it. But we had to rethink it, and it's not about tearing down all the schools and rebuilding them and getting everything that we think works right for students right now, but it is about having a facility master plan where, like this school, this building is prepared for years to come to educate high school students, and there are pressing needs. We understand there are schools that really need attention real fast, and some of the people on the committee says, just fix the Sandburg parking lot. That would be a good starter. You know, because you have to have a four-wheel drive vehicle to go through there. So there, as we said, we're not exactly talking about that, but primary maintenance probably is a concern, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to that. There are 2 small group activities you can do, and again, it's more conceptualized, as you can see. It's not about talking about additions, or it's not talking about which schools to start doing what, but it's a talk about, it's a focus on how you want to build the master plan. And if each table would appoint or select a recorder and a facilitator, and the recorder will do just that. We'll write down on these sheets what are you recording, and the facilitator will moderate the discussion. And hopefully it will be what is recorded are the collective decisions, and not just one person's or two persons' ideas about that. Task number 1 are community priorities, and that is right here, the large worksheet. Now, you don't have to there's 12 of them here, and you have dots that you on your table. The green dots are the highest value, and the yellow and red dots. And you can read the color dots provide to indicate your table's consensus priority. And again, it's consensus priorities place no more than 1 dot next to each item. Now, on the bottom, you may have your own ideas, and that wouldn't be surprising. 1 would be good, and 2, that may be the Sandburg parking lot gets all the green dots. I don't know, but anyway. That's what you're going to do with this first task, and take about 20 minutes to do it. And the second task is list on it's about additional considerations, and go through that, and then you also additionally you have create your own additional consideration. Go through there, look at them, and then talk about if you choose to provide any additional comments if you want to. And then you only have a choice of ranking 1, 2, and 3. So the other ones won't be ranked like the dot situation is. It's only going to be 1, 2, or 3. And that's going to be 20 minutes. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask anyone. And you can begin right now. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to make you be quiet now, and we would like to hear what you have to say. So John and I are going to come around to the groups, and your recorder, whoever's going to report, needs to give us whatever you put green dots by. So on this sheet, tell us what you put a green dot by. So if you put all your green dots in 1 box, just read the 1 box. If you put them on 3 boxes, read those 3, but only the green box, okay? And I think we're gonna start with that, because time-wise, we might not get through the other one. Is that okay? All right, so we'll be coming around and have your paper ready. Okay. I'm going to read for this group, number 11. They put their green dots these over here to improve learning spaces in classrooms to be adaptable for flexible instruction, to develop a comprehensive facilities plan that considers the interrelatedness of student achievement. And then finally, that the actions and future building improvements should focus on aging and outdated buildings as a priority over the needs of future-ready students. So those are their top 3 priorities from work activity 1. All right, we'll go across the room now.
Okay, we sort of cheated and put more green dots because we merged tables. But we thought that improving the learning space in classrooms to be adaptable and flexible to support was important. Also to make spaces for STEM type activities. And really felt that the climate of the room and kids being comfortable and having that space for them as the best learning environment were also very important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our greens were all on number 1, 2, and 3. So we said explore the financial and operational impacts. We read that as being able to move spaces around so that maybe grade level buildings, those sort of things. Consider the issues of adequacy and equity, and address facility impacts to support an all-day kindergarten program.
Okay, so when we looked at things, we kind of went to find our top 3 and then our bottom 3, and went that way. So we thought initially that when we talked about priorities, enhancing safety, security, and accessibility was something that we really just couldn't avoid. It would have to happen no matter what. So if it's got to happen, it probably ought to be a priority. In many ways, number 2 on that action list would then also be actions for and future building improvements should focus on aging and outdated buildings. Again, just as a sort of focus on the immediate needs and sort of triage in a sense. And then strongly consider improvements that would help teachers better facilitate the 4 C's would be our number 3. Then we kind of had a knife fight about the yellows, in part because 3 of them really seem to say the same thing. Essentially, improving learning spaces and developing a comprehensive plan all seem to be part of what we thought was very important.
So Table 12 had very distinct classifications as well. I'll just talk about the green ones. Improving learning spaces in classrooms to be adaptable for flexible instruction, collaboration, etc. The strongly consider improvements that will help for the 4 C's, and actions and future building improvements were deemed the top items from our group. We were able to very clearly identify our top, middle, and bottom tier items, but those were the ones that were focused around our collaborative mind share.
Hello, this is table 29. We didn't have too many people, but we work, and we agree that our priorities will be enhance safety, security, and accessibility of all school facilities as necessary. Consider improvements that will help teachers better facilitate learning around the 4 C's, communicating, creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration. And we create our own. We would like that the plans will be based in expenses in realistic budgets and work within the means and do not incur in debt. In task number 2, we wanted to give priority to create appropriate space and support technology, increasing role in student learning, creating balanced and rigorous curriculum to make the space that is created accordingly to the use, and provide appropriate furniture and evolving learning activities. The comments that we put is like create an inclusive classroom and do not segregate any students due to special needs or language barriers. And provide sufficient space in each school to support music and art programs. We think that the importance to create learning in all levels and all areas in a universal way of learning. Music and art are programs that complement math, for example. Thank you.
Okay, our first one, we combined the develop a long-range approach to addressing facility issues that balance future-ready learning environments with practical infrastructure needs and space realities. With improving learning spaces and classrooms to be adaptable, we felt they were very similar. Also, actions and future building improvements should focus on aging and outdated buildings as a priority over the needs of future-ready students and desired curricular programs. The buildings need to be ADA compliant. And enhance safety and security and accessibility at all schools and facilities as necessary, and we felt that really should be a given and top priority.
Table 9, we have some similar green dots. First one being improve learning spaces in classrooms to be adaptable for flexible instruction, small groups. And also to strongly consider improvements that will help teachers better facilitate learning around the 4 C's. However, we do have a red dot on one, which it's contradictory to some of the groups. Actions and future building improvements should focus on aging, outdated buildings. Just as the way it's worded, we felt like it shouldn't be an either or as a priority. It's just we felt that it was we'd like to see both. So as worded, we didn't like that as well. And we do have a red dot in the top 2 on the left, exploring financial and operational impacts of alternative grade configurations and or balanced enrollments. Some questions about balanced enrollments in general, what that means. And the one underneath it, consider the adequacy of equity. Of course, we want adequacy and equity, but just, again, what is that question actually asking? I think we questioned that. On the green sheet, we had maybe not too surprisingly, we had provide sufficient space in each school to support music and the art programs, and also right underneath that, assure sufficient and appropriate spaces for special needs programs.
So our greens were consider the issues of adequacy and equity such that balanced class sizes and access to programs are not predetermined by one's address facility impacts to support all-day kindergarten programs in District 205, and actions and future building improvements should focus on aging and outdated buildings as a priority over the needs of future-ready students and desired curricular programs. And then on the green sheet, our number 1, we basically combined 3. Reconfigure space to reinvent library space, better utilizing technology and student access to learning tools. Our number 2 was provide sufficient space in each school to support music and art. And number 3 was assure sufficient and appropriate spaces for special needs programs, because that's required anyway.
So we noticed that there seemed to be some overlaps on some of the sections here. So we had a little bit of a hard time picking our greens. Having said that, we picked the 2 on the right-hand side at the top as a green, develop a long-range approach to addressing facility issues. And then the one below it, improve learning spaces in classrooms to be adaptable for flexible instruction, et cetera. Like the gentleman over here made a comment about the actions and future building improvements. Should the focus be on aging and outdated buildings or programs? We felt like it was too much of an either-or choice, so we actually reworded it and gave it a green. So we wrote it as such. Age and building conditions should be considered for extra support as we build a plan to develop future-ready students and desired curricular programs.
We had a green on actions and future building improvements. Should focus on aging, and it really goes with a 5-year strategic plan, is what we wrote in. So we put a green next to that with a note that says basically as shown in a 5-year plan. 'Cause that needs to go hand in hand. And then right after that was safety and security and accessibility was our second green. And then third green was develop a long-range plan, which kind of goes in hand with action below. And then we had a yellow to green. We wish we had 4 greens, I think, which is address facility impacts to support an all-day kindergarten program. That was our first yellow. STEM was second, and then core considerations. We, like Table 9, gentlemen, the first 2, we really didn't like the way they were written, and like to clarify what they actually mean. So we put a red next to both of them. We understand there's a concern about capacities in zoning, but just like to understand what those two mean a little bit. And then the other two reds were the 4 C's, and then develop a comprehensive plan, interrelatedness, student achievement. Do we need to do this part 2 thing? Sweet. Thank you. Our priority 1 on the second task was reinvent our libraries, better align with the needs of today's, tomorrow's students. And then we had provide sufficient space in each school to support music and arts program is our 2. And then we had 2 3s, 2 tied for 3rd. Assure sufficient and appropriate spaces for special needs programs and create appropriate spaces to support technologies, increasing role in student learning was also tied for 3rd.
For table 6, we also had a lot of problems with how the questions were written, so we dumped them and did our own. The first was, and I'm sorry to whoever wrote them, balance out the square foot per student were our priorities, and repurpose where possible, replace where necessary, and okay, the only question on here that we sort of agreed with, but we only agreed with half of it, was the explore the financial and operational impacts of alternative grade configurations. We said no. Balanced enrollments, we said yes. And we didn't get to the green sheet because we were arguing over this.
So I just want to thank you all for coming, for participating as a community. Obviously, I think the unifying thing tonight was we need a plan. So this is the first part of the plan. And we look forward to continuing the conversation in 2016. Thank you for coming. Good night.